Welcome to the Geekcentric podcast, and welcome to our spoiler-free review for Gladiator II. What did Spartacus say when the lion ate his wife? Nothing. He was Gladiator. Welcome, loyal subjects, to the Geekiverse. This is the Geekcentric podcast, and today we are reviewing a movie 24 years in the making, Gladiator II. A huge thanks to our friends at Paramount Pictures Canada for the early preview. If you're joining us for the first time, once again, we are Geekcentric, a podcast focusing on the world of movies, TV shows, games, toys, and collectibles, and all things Geekcentric. My name is Kevin David McKean Hudson, commander of this week's episode, generally a fan of epic blockbusters, loyal servant to terrible Toronto sports teams, father to a beautiful daughter, husband to an amazing wife, and I will review movies in this life or the next. Of course, today we are here to review the follow-up to a movie that received 12 Oscar nominations and won 5, including Best Actor in a Leading Role, and of course, Best Picture. This is our spoiler-free review for Gladiator II. And now, in the original Gladiator, Maximus needed a team of fighters to help win many of his battles in the Colosseum. I am no different and will call on loyal soldiers to aid in my efforts to conquer this review. Sound the horns and welcome to the arena, a pair of ferocious mercenaries, always available to review the most challenging movies and television shows. Warriors who, with brute honesty, serve the Geekcentric empire by slaying the worst in entertainment while helping to bring triumph to the best. I present to you Darcidius Hudson X and Justinian Laurentia.
Damn. I like my gladiator name. That's pretty dope. That's a pretty badass name.
Yeah, you sound a lot tougher than you might actually be.
Yeah, exactly.
So am I the 10th? Like, is that what you're saying? I'm the 10th Darcidius? Or...
I don't know. I just like they always throw an X or an ES at the end of their names.
I like the idea that you're Sidious, though, right? Like
yeah, that
Darcidius.
Like, ooh, that's cool.
Like,
that's a cool crossover.
Yeah, I like that.
We're talking about empires and emperors.
Yeah. Oh, and another nickname from some of my friends is now Darth Vader. So it's
Darth
right up there
Vader.
The dark side.
Oh,
which
I like
never,
that one.
I never
that's a very
associated with that one much, but I always like these names.
Yeah, I tried to make Kev Solo work for a little while, and it just doesn't have
it never took off.
Darth Vader. No.
It never took off.
Despite my many efforts. But gentlemen, are we battle ready?
Yes.
Okay, well, let's see about that. Let's take ourselves back 2,000 years. You stand in the center of the great Roman Colosseum in front of 65,000 spectators and face a life or death situation. If you had to fight for your life in one of the following two scenarios, which would it be? Head-to-head in a singles competition against a seasoned gladiator, or you and two other fighters against two ferocious man-eating tigers?
I'm going to go with the team. I feel like I work better with the team. I don't know if I have the cunning wiles to get past a seasoned gladiator, because you always need a trick or two to win one of those fights. I'm not sure if I'd be clever enough in the heat of a moment to think like that.
Yeah, I think that's the beauty about those matches too, right? Obviously, if it's a one-on-one, it's definitely, who's the best. But in the past films where you do see teams work together and they do come together, right? The expectation is that they would all just fight for themselves, and that's how they die, is that frenzy of trying to keep themselves alive. But the reality is if they could work together as a team, then they might stand a better chance than if they were to go at it alone. So yeah, I'm definitely with that. If there's an opportunity to work as a team to get out of it alive, that's why I like escape rooms, like It's the same thing in my
You're
mind.
just a
you know?
cheerleader in escape rooms, though. You're just sitting there like, yeah, you guys got this. I'm
Yeah,
over here.
Oh yeah, Darcy's got that. I don't need to worry about that. Yeah, no, I definitely am that guy.
Do we need to draw anything, guys?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I just like that you guys are like, yeah, we'd work as a team. Whereas I would definitely pick the same scenario. I'm not going against this seasoned gladiator. I'm not going against anybody one-on-one.
Yeah.
There are a few people I'm beating in that. Maybe you like against you two, like I'm like 50-50. Okay, I have a chance here. A seasoned gladiator, I'm toast in 3 seconds. But no, I want to go against these tigers with 2 other suckers who I'm like pushing towards the tigers, distracting them so I can maybe take the tigers down while they're eating the other guys. No honor when it comes to life and death and myself. But something that does have a lot of honor is we recently surpassed the 5,000 follower mark on Instagram and are actually rapidly approaching the 6,000 follower mark. As a result, the Geekcentric Empire is preparing to host a celebration of games in our honor. But before we can do that, we have a spoiler-free review to take care of. From legendary director Ridley Scott and written by David Scarpa, Gladiator II continues the epic saga of power, intrigue, and vengeance set in ancient Rome. Years after witnessing the death of the revered hero Maximus at the hands of his uncle, Lucius is forced to enter the Colosseum after his home is conquered by the tyrannical emperors who now lead Rome with an iron fist. With rage in his heart and the future of the empire at stake, Lucius must look to his past to find strength and honor to return the glory of Rome to its people. The film stars Paul Mescal, Pedro Pascal, Joseph Quinn, Fred Heschner, Leo Raz, Derek Jacobi, and also features Connie Nielsen and Denzel Washington. The film clashes its way into theaters on November 22nd. But let's get right on with the review. Again, everything will be spoiler free, and I think we'll focus on the performances, the production of this ancient set blockbuster, and on the storytelling. Obviously, there were huge sandals to fill in this film, with Russell Crowe taking home the Best Actor Academy Award for his portrayal in the original. Not to mention terrific supporting performances from Joaquin Phoenix, another Oscar nominee, in fact, as well as Oliver Reed, Richard Harris, and Jimon Hansu, amongst others. Did we feel that same kind of gravitas from the new cast this time around?
Yeah, I would say yes. I would say that the across the board, I think the cast really does deliver. The standouts are obviously Paul Mescal, Joseph Quinn, and you said it, Denzel Washington. He is just
My senator.
yeah, my senator, my gladiator. He is unreal. He's truly the anchor in a lot of ways. The film's not necessarily about him, but he's obviously very integral to the story. But each of these actors really brought an intensity, a gravitas, a presence to them, and also Pedro Pascal and Connie Nielsen. I think again the cast understood the role of what they were being asked to do, and I think that everyone really brought it. And I just think that when we talk about what worked, their performances did work. I don't know if the story worked to their advantage though, because I think that while the cast does shine, it feels like they're more utilized as just pieces on a board to move the story rather than having any sort of real unique voice. Like we'll talk about it in when we get to story, but like a lot of these characters felt very archetypal to the previous film and just sort of approached differently, given the fact that like time has passed since the first Gladiator. It's been 24 years for us, like you said, but in the movie it's only been 16 years apparently. So there's not that much of a distance between Maximus and his story and where we find ourselves in this follow-up. But yeah, I thought that was really interesting. Like I had no problem with anyone's performance. I think I really just had a problem with how the story utilized some of the characters, because I really liked Joseph Quinn as well. Like I thought he was like just as much as Denzel having a presence, so did Joseph, and he's definitely a force to be reckoned with in terms of acting, and look forward to seeing more of him, especially with the fact that he's going to be in Fantastic Four as Johnny Storm.
Yeah, I have to agree. I loved it. Denzel is a standout performance in this film. If there's a reason to go watch it, is to watch him just act the hell out of this role he's been given and just do a really good job. I do feel like it was nothing new for Pascal, Pedro Pascal, to bring in this performance. It was
Yeah.
very flat, and like you said, his character just served as a means to an end for something in the story. So I feel like it was a disservice to use him in that role
Yeah.
because he is such a good actor. And
Mhm.
I have to say the same thing about Paul Mescal. Again, he's our leading man, and I didn't find him nearly as engaging as Russell Crowe in that first one, where like you felt everything Russell Crowe was going through and why he was doing it. And because the way that the story was written, Lucius's story is not nearly as engaging. And with Paul Mescal, he's doing his best to bring it to life, but again, it feels very flat and reminiscent, but
Mm.
not doing it well job. I don't know. It's weird. It was
Mhm.
weird.
Yeah, I think, like you said, there's Paul does a fine job in the role and with what he's given, but Russell Crowe was on screen with some incredible actors. We mentioned Oliver Reed, Richard Harris, Jimon Hansu, and he doesn't just like stand next to them as peers. His performance like surpasses them. He's not overshadowing anybody, but there's a reason he won Best Actor that
Mhm.
year. He's so just magnetic, and I didn't get nearly that same kind of chemistry from Paul Mescal, that just like on-screen superstar heroic presence that I think we got from Russell back in the
Mhm.
first. And I think that's like the primary thing that this movie needs. If you're going to bring out a sequel to that movie and you're going to wait so long to do it, there has to be this like just monumental lead performance, and Denzel Washington swallows him in almost
Mhm.
every
Yeah.
scene they're in
Mhm.
together. And so like just you said, Denzel Washington isn't the main character. He kind of is, not just based on his performance but based on the story they're telling. He's kind of the central focus in a lot of
It's
ways,
true. Yeah.
and the character of Lucius is kind of just there because we know who he is from the first one. And I think that does a real disservice to the film overall. um, I will just quickly agree that Joseph Quinn does a terrific job. I know I heard a lot of people saying coming out of it, I could just hear some murmurings that they were kind of almost mocking Fred Heschinger's performance. I thought he did a great job given the character that he was playing. I think maybe what was going on with that character was a bit misunderstood by some people because we can't really get into details about what's going on with that character, but I think the portrayal of a person like that, especially as somebody who's has done a lot of studying of ancient Rome and some of the emperors that were tyrannical and just absolutely batshit crazy, like mentally disturbed, diagnosable, just batshit crazy. I think he did that in a really fun way that kind of juxtaposed nicely next to Joseph Quinn's portrayal of a similar but different version of that character. So they were kind of the two sides of the same coin.
Right. And they both worked off of each other really, really well,
Mhm.
right? Like as being brothers and being seen as both these sort of erratic, tyrannical emperors. They both were sort of the yin and yang to the thing where, I think Joseph Quinn's representation felt a little more like unhinged, but more
Controlled.
control and calculated.
Yeah.
Whereas his brother, Caracalla, is obviously coming off really erratic and having to sort of be reined in by his brother from time to time. So like again, like I get that maybe it was a little unhinged for some, that like, but I don't think that the performances were the issue
No.
here for me. I just think it was how they were written and how these characters were treated, as sort of like, just they're pieces on a board, they need to move the story along, and this is what it is. And to your point, Darcy, absolutely, like Pedro Pascal's good in everything he does.
Mhm.
It seems like you didn't really need Pedro Pascal for this role.
Yeah.
You could have had
He
someone
was
else.
literally somebody to slap on the poster. And like
Absolutely.
I know a lot of people on Twitter were like, "Oh, he's only got so much screen time." And people instantly countered, like, do you know some of the best performances of all time had less screen time than he's
Yeah.
going to have in this movie? It wasn't that we didn't get enough of him. It's just that the character they gave to him wasn't important enough or worth a guy like Pedro. He didn't have enough to do.
Yeah.
He almost looked kind of bored. I don't know. It was such a flat outing from him in terms of what he normally brings.
Very flat, very muted, right? Like it just, it was very background very
Hmm.
secondary, which is fine, obviously, if you're, if you understand your role, right? But to the point of what you guys are saying, yeah, I understand what you're both mentioning, with Paul versus sort of Denzel, especially like the intrigue for me too was with Denzel and like
Hmm.
what's going on with him, right? Paul, it was like, we were teetering back and forth, but like even in you in your synopsis, you mentioned, you know, Lucius, right? Who is from the first film. Like I don't know, like when we were in the screening and the person comes out to introduce the film before it starts, they have the same synopsis, and I was like, oh, they really are just going to tell us that he is the son of
Of Maximus, yeah.
of Maximus, right? Like it was pretty wild. Like
Well, and then my issue is like let's just I think we've like I'm jumping into story here because we have to if we're talking about this. Then they spend the first 2/3 of the movie creating pretending there's a mystery
around it.
be
Yeah.
around that, when in the trailer, in the synopsis, in the introduction we were given, it's all stated like there was no mystery. So the fact that the whole story was built around a mystery that isn't a mystery to the audience is so silly, and it wasn't portrayed on screen in a well enough way that it was interesting because the characters
Mhm.
had to find this out because
Yeah.
we knew. We were like, well, duh, like duh, you know.
Yeah, I feel like again, it could have been something that might have been a good caveat to keep secret and allow the audiences to kind of discover that. I think that's a bit of a misstep, or unless it was a last minute trigger pull to like kind of incorporate all that information and direct it that way so that they could ensure that people were actually going to go see this movie. I'm not sure. But you know what? Let's keep with what your flow is here. Was there any, like, did you guys have any other characters that you wanted to talk about?
I just want to mention Matt Lucas because Doctor Who fan over here always loves to see my companions or former doctors pop up in anything, and seeing him as the Coliseum announcer, he always brought a smile to my face as he was introducing the next games for us to watch.
Yeah.
So that was a fun little highlight for me from the movie.
I mean, Darce, I think while Matt Lucas did a great job in the role, this is a problem with the sequel that hits so many notes of the first one that you have to compare two movies. And I honestly think David Hemmings was just so iconic in that role. Like I tried to
Mm.
channel it there without waking anybody up in my house during my intro there, because it's just something that for 24 years has been so iconic. And so it's almost unfair, kind of like it is for Mescal. Like it's unfair that these guys have to step into these huge shoes and be expected to at least reach the level that was there before, if not surpass it. It's just such a tough challenge. And as an audience member, you're sitting there constantly comparing these very similar elements. And so again,
Mhm.
that's not to take away anything from the performance in this movie. I was just like, oh, the whole time I'm going, oh man, but it's just not quite as good.
Yeah, I think again, like you're absolutely right. Like even when you think about like someone like Paul in relation to Russell, what they're given, what they're expected, I think the better mentality for Paul is to not come in there and expect that he's going to outshine or do the same in any way that Russell did with the role, but to try to do his own version of it. But I think again, just the way his character was written and how things were kind of handled, it fell really flat. Whereas I think what Russell was able to do was add more depth and emotion to the character through, I think, improvisation of like emotions and feelings. Like there's a lot of Russell just acting without words in that film,
Hmm.
right?
For
And
sure.
there's some of that with Paul, but most of it is dialogue based, and we have to get a sense of it. So I think that's the advantage that Russell had in a movie 25 years ago, was that he was left to kind of embrace some of the emotions and bring that to the forefront through his performance, rather than relying on some maybe heavy-handed at times dialogue that would kind of moving forward. But you bring up characters from the past film, Connie Nielsen, obviously from the original film, is back, daughter of the original Caesar, or the Caesar that we knew,
Marcus Aurelius.
Marcus Aurelius. Yeah. And, I think that her performance as well was, was sort of serviceable. Like it just served a part to sort of be this real layer of connectivity. But
I know we don't like to get too negative here, but we do like to be honest. Something was off with that performance.
yeah,
It was like they weren't using her best takes. It was like they weren't getting the best out of her. It's like she forgot who this character was. Like, I wish I had the benefit of seeing these two movies within like a 24-hour period, like I know Darcy and Nate did, but
Hmm.
my memory of the character was completely different than the one we got in this movie. And I just thought the acting was off.
I think again, I think she's just a little like I saw it as well. I watched the original before we saw the film, and I think there was a little more theatricality, a little more leaning into that Roman side of the performance. She was being a little deceptive, and she had her own plans, if you will, and you could kind of sense that based on the way she kind of approached some of her conversations. But here she seems very victim, like she's the victim.
Very
She's the
broken.
victim, right, and very broken. And I think that kind of attributes to maybe why her performance was so kind of stinted from the original. But that
You
said,
don't
I
think
do.
she's the victim in the first one, where her like incestuous tyrannical brother who killed her father is going to like kill her son at every turn? She's a broken woman in that one too. I mean, maybe it's 15 years of being broken and 15 years of living in fear. And
I think at the end of the day, I think in the first one she was a fighter. I think here she's a lot more just realizing that things have changed, and she doesn't want to fight anymore. Do you know what I mean? Like she's kind of like coming to that those terms. But I don't know. I feel like, again, just as we've kind of reiterated with all of these performances, they're for me at least, the performances were good, and some were better than others. It's just how these characters were handled, and I really think, again, when we come back to story, we'll talk about it.
yes, just I think the best thing we could do is we'll save story and sort of dissect that in a spoiler-free way as best we can towards the end. But I do want to move into something else that the original movie was renowned for,
Mhm.
and that's its production values. The original Gladiator won the Academy Awards for Best Visual Effects, Costume Design, and Sound, while also nabbing nominations for Best Director, Best Cinematography, Best Music, and Best Art Direction, Set Direction. Does Gladiator II have the same kind of incredible production values that might lead to some award recognition in these categories in 2025?
To me, I think it is living up to the look, at least the way they've brought the aesthetics of the Roman Empire back to the screen. I think was really well done. Honestly, I was missing the very Pirates of the Caribbean esque soundtrack from the first one that Hans Zimmer did.
Mhm.
I don't know. This one didn't have the same. I mean, I don't want to say fun, but that's what that first track
Wasn't as
was. It
memorable.
was exactly. This one
Yeah.
was very just typical, kind of period piece soundtrack, whereas that first one at least had some fun and some whimsy to it at those moments where you're supposed to be getting excited. So this
Mhm.
one, where we had these big battles, I was kind of missing that soundtrack to get you excited or ramped up about things. So
That
Mhm.
that
fun
was a bit.
sweeping score. This one almost
Yeah,
like lent into generic action movie
yeah,
Mhm.
versus,
yeah.
epic period, set piece.
It did at times reference the original score and bring it in, and that's when it
During
was
certain
most.
moments for
Yeah,
sure.
when it
Hmm.
was most noticeable. Like, yeah, I remember that. Especially, I believe there's like a song with some vocal work that we get a little bit throughout the movie that obviously is very reminiscent of the original film. But like, yeah, like I do think that the score was, again, just like we were talking about with the characters. Some of them, it was just serviceable. Like, it just met the needs of making this feel a bit grander in scale. I am with you though, Darce. I think that this, definitely matches that scale and signature, or grandeur, if you will, that you would come to know from Ridley Scott. He's an epic storyteller, and it's on full display here. Things are massive and they're meticulously crafted. They're detailed, and I think it's immersing you in Rome. And I think that when we watched it originally, Kevin, you and I watched it in high school. I was like, we were both blown away, and just at how it transported us to that time. We hadn't seen anything like that. So I think there's a great, the technical execution of this, from sort of using like the costume design and cinematography elements, as well as practical effects and CGI. It all comes together to create an experience that feels both like historically rich and visually immersive. And I think that's very telling to the kind of movies Ridley likes to make. Like, Ridley is very hit or miss with his films, but there is some things that you've come to expect. And not a lot of people liked Napoleon for a variety of reasons, but a lot of people would say, like, technically it feels like a Ridley Scott film just because of the scale, scope, and grandeur of it. So I think this is very much, if you are a Ridley Scott fan, for what he can bring from that side, this is definitely a film that's gonna make that shine.
Yeah, I think there are some like really cool aerial shots over the city of Rome that I was like, wow, this feels so much bigger than what they were able to do back in 2000. And so I was impressed by the few shots like that we got. I think maybe one of the things that hindered a bit more of like being on the ground level in the streets of Rome is that in the story we have these, it's in the description that were given by the studio that these two tyrannical emperors are sort of leading Rome down a bad path. And so as a result, there's not as much life and vibrancy when you're outside of the Colosseum. And so I kind of missed some of those like ground level, real life, day-to-day vibes that you get so strong from the first one. Here, I didn't feel that nearly as much. They almost spend too much time in small corridors or hidden away rooms in the Colosseum or other places instead of giving you that rich, vibrant experience of being in the heart of the Roman capital.
Well, that sounds like a really great segue into story, if I might say so myself, because I feel like that's one element that's really stuck with, is that the Colosseum and everything about I know it's called Gladiator, right? But there is a whole aspect about Rome and where Rome is at this point in time that we don't really get to see. We just hear about, and it's captured in other ways. But we had moments like that in the original Gladiator that showed us the streets of Rome, right? Where we could see the sort of the city and the intricacies of like how people are and so on and so forth, how life was in Rome.
And how our main characters interacted within that environment.
Exactly. And I don't think, again, in this film, it's pretty bad, right? It's pretty bad right now, the current state of affairs in Rome. So it's like, but we don't really get to see that. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know if we really got that opportunity to see it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, especially if you're like Marcus Aurelius was a true character, like a real person. He was the last emperor of Rome before the descent and fall of the empire. So we're supposed to be seeing, like you said, Kevin, this very distraught, like worn down by corruption and everything, and spreading themselves too thin version of Rome, and we just don't get that from this movie. And even these emperors who, like that you said, were billed as being the ones who are really leading them down this path, it's not really hinted at outside of their little throne room or whatever. And it's weird how they're trying to build these characters as, again, the emperors that need to be overthrown, and we're not really seeing them make these decisions that we're supposed to hate and want to overthrow them for. So it was just weird to place us at this timeline and not really focus on the fact that Rome is crumbling, and it's really just the final chance to try and pull a few pieces together to right some sort of a sinking ship. So it's a weird choice to set it here and not focus on that aspect of history.
Yeah, just I think like right near the beginning, you sort of nailed one of the biggest issues around the story when you said that, Paul isn't given, or I guess Lucius, the character, isn't given as many situations to act and make us feel. He's just telling us how we should feel. And this whole movie kind of does that. It just tells us what's happening and what's going on, but doesn't really show us anything that supports these claims. And we're just supposed to be like, oh, okay, these guys are really bad and this guy's really good. And this guy does this because he said he's going to, not like we don't feel or see or experience motivations and reasons to support the actions of the characters. It's just all sort of told, like we're just told this is what's happening and this is what's next and this is what's next. I didn't find myself sitting there going, oh my God, I really hope that this happens next. And I really hope that, oh, I can't believe he did that. And now I want him to go and do this. It's just sort of like A, B, C, D, this is what's happening. And here's the story. There's no like authenticity to it. It's all just sort of crafted around ideas that they're telling us instead of letting us feel for ourselves.
Yeah. And I think the other thing too is, we were kind of touching on it before though, is that like, yeah, the film delivers a spectacle for sure, but it doesn't reach the same emotional resonance as the original because we've already gone through very similar situations, right? The first Gladiator was driven by Maximus's personal journey for loss, revenge, and redemption. And those same themes are at play here for Lucius. And they kind of go through the same wheels of motion in a lot of ways. Even characters like, again, I love Denzel, but he's sort of the Proximo, and he just has a lot more importance and emphasis and more of a plan than Proximo ever had. And I think that Joseph Quinn, obviously, you can compare to Joaquin Phoenix's Emperor. Like, there's like, apart from just character associations, there's just a lot of this film that feels sort of rehashed all over again, but not evolved, right? And that's where I'm like really struggling with this movie. It's like, I love the first film. It's one of my favorites. It's a 5-star, but this one, it just feels like, didn't we already do all of this? Like, aren't we
And
just
better?
kind of, yeah, and
Mhm.
aren't we just retreading on these themes and seeing it again? Are we saying that that's what drives Gladiators? Are themes of loss, revenge, and redemption? Like, is that what we're saying? Because then that's pretty one-dimensional, especially given the fact that there's like a whole slew of like political intrigue surrounding the what's going on with Rome, like we were saying, and kind of giving Rome back to the people, and living the dream of what Marcus Aurelius wanted. Like, there's all of that we're being told, like you said, Kevin, but we're not shown that, we're not seeing that. So there's a lot of telling, not showing.
And it's funny because we're earlier this year we had the privilege of seeing another movie that was 20 years or more than 20 years for the sequel and Twisters, and how while that story
Mhm.
did rehash a lot of the same things from the first film, they managed to, like you said, bring it up to a modern level of storytelling and just evolving it. Whereas this one, again, rehashes the same storyline, and when you like within the first 5 minutes you can easily see the parallels between Lucius and Maximus and how their journey begins and where it goes from that point on. But with the original film, a lot of Maximus's journey wasn't like he handed to him. It was just kind of happenstance. He had given up on life, and life kind of just pushed him in the direction to the point where he could get this redemption. Whereas this one feels the opposite, where the redemption is being forced onto Lucius, and it's you're not feeling that character growth. It was weird. It was very similar, but not as rewarding because it maybe you've already been through it. I don't know.
Mhm.
Well, and yeah, it just doesn't feel nearly as earned. But no, I think we're living in the age of rebootquels. This is Hollywood's thing. And you mentioned one that worked a lot better in Twisters, in that it was a sequel, in name and in energy, but it was its own thing. You know what I mean? It was just a story taking place in the same universe rather than a direct follow up to
Mm-hmm.
that first movie. Then you have another legacy sequel, rebootquel, in the form of Ghostbusters, the first of the two, in that it didn't tell the exact same story, but played off of a lot of the tropes and brought back familiar characters and had fun with it. But again, told a different story that actually made it uh, a far better example of a sequel than this
Mm-hmm.
movie. This movie is less of a sequel and more of a just a rebootquel. It's just
Mhm.
like the same movie 24 years later with different names on very similar character archetypes, and they're, like you said, like they do the exact same things in the exact same order, and
Mhm.
that doesn't make sense for a story that is billed as a sequel and easily could have been a sequel given where we left off and what story they could have told. Like, this didn't
Mhm.
need to be like a beat for beat recreation of the first. That idea is never going to work. And so that's where I was, and like you said, Darcy, you could feel it in the first 5 minutes. You were just like, oh, I see exactly where this is going
Mm-hmm.
right from the beginning. And so there was no unpredictability to it. There was no suspense. There was no intrigue. It was just like, oh, I bet this is going to happen next. Boom, there it goes. Oh, yeah, man, that is just like the first one. And that is where it really fell flat from a storytelling perspective.
Yes.
But I think, gentlemen, that the ceremonies are about to begin. The celebrations are afoot, so we should wrap this review up like a toga and get to our final thoughts and scores for the film. Today, we'll be doing so on a scale of 1 to 5, Emperor thumbs up or down. I will leave that to you, depending on how you felt about the movie. Darce, you want to lead us off?
Sure. And just before I go into it, you mentioned toga. I got to say, Pedro Pascal did have a very dramatic toga flip at one point in the film. So look forward to that.
Maybe the most exciting thing he does on the screen.
Yeah.
I kid. He has some pretty cool action moments.
Again, Denzel Washington is reason enough to watch this film. His character is the most original in the story journey he goes on. You understand his motives a lot more than you do Paul Mescal's, because Paul Mescal's is forced upon you and it doesn't feel earned, like we were talking about. Again, the performances are all great. I just feel like this movie maybe was a bit overstuffed. I feel like a lot of the characters were unnecessary, kind of fulfilled the same purpose and role, and could have been done with maybe a bit more toned down or trimmed down to let these characters have a bit more, so you can understand the motivations and the machinations behind why we're supposed to hate them or like them or anything like that. Again, the score was lacking, but the look managed to really bring me back to that. Again, the first time watching it, which was the day before, that epicness and scale was still there, especially when we were fighting the game. So it was a lot of fun. But again, the flat story and the unengaging just way that you're forced through it is where the movie falters. So I'll be giving this one 3 out of 5. Can I stay thumbs in the middle? Like, I haven't decided yet.
Oh, you're going to leave the crowd in suspense.
Yeah.
Will
I'll
he
let
live
you
or
guys.
will he die?
Yeah, one of you guys can make that final call.
Yeah. I you know what? I do think people will be entertained, right? Like you will be entertained by this movie. There is no doubt about that. But I think, and it has a lot to do with the fact that, Gladiator II impresses with, Ridley Scott's epic scale and the sweeping visuals that will take you back to ancient Rome and showcase the stunning details, and you'll see well choreographed fights, and they do some cool shit in the Colosseum for sure. Very entertaining. Another entertaining part: Paul Mescal, Joseph Quinn, Denzel Washington, especially Denzel Washington, as Darcy was saying, he is the standout, and you really do connect and want to know more about his motive and his intention. Whereas Paul Mescal is, as while being like the gladiator, everything that happens with him is not earned. I really loved how you called that out. So yeah, like 100% Denzel, fire performance. But all of these characters really do feel mostly functional rather than having any sort of deep personal arcs for them to kind of have through this film. They're pieces on the board to help move the story forward. And I think while the film succeeds in the grandeur and maintains a sort of continuity with the original, it does not capture the same emotional depth and lasting impact that the original had. This is, again, entertainment for entertainment's sake. And I think ultimately, it left me craving a little more roar from Rome in a lot of ways. And I think that I would give this a 3 out of 5 thumbs up, because I think it's still, it's 3 thumbs up is not a bad. It's not a bad movie. I think this is a good movie. I think it's entertaining, but it's going to be forgettable in a lot of ways. And I think the only thing that people are really going to remember are Denzel and maybe Joseph Quinn as well.
I think Denzel is fantastic in this. He's going to get an Oscar nomination. He's going to carry the torch in that regard from the original. But I think that's where the positive similarities for me sort of end. I think that this movie, they suffered from the fact that they got pigeonholed by the name. If the original had been called anything but Gladiator, the sequel to it would have been about anything but a gladiator. But because it's called Gladiator II, I think they felt like, well, shit, we have to make this one about a gladiator as well. No, it could have been Gladiator II, Gladiator in name only, and been a spiritual successor to the original film. And I think there are far more interesting ways they could have told the story of Lucius finding out that Maximus was his father and having to return to Rome or try and fight for the Rome that his father died for and his grandfather died for. There were so many more interesting ways they could have done that than being forced into retelling the exact same bloody story about a gladiator. And so for that reason, the movie just falls flat. It feels way too predictable and hits way too many similar beats as the first one without any of the emotional payoff or gratification. I just felt so much of the moments were forced and not earned. And so at the end, I just found it to be flat overall. And like, I hate to simply focus on the fact that it doesn't live up to its predecessor, but when you are filling such huge shoes, there's so much expectation there that it's almost impossible to achieve that. But because they went the route that they did, it has to be compared to, and it's a lesser product. And then even on its own as a movie, it's just kind of okay. And so when you combine those two factors, was I not entertained? No, not really. As such, I will be giving this a 2.5 out of 5 Emperor thumbs down. Well, that's it for this spoiler-free review of Gladiator II, which rides a chariot into theaters November 22nd. I think this is a big, massive blockbuster. People are going to go. They're going to enjoy it. They're going to have fun. And if you don't go in with this expectation of an Oscar-caliber movie, which I kind of did just because I think it should be a lot of fun. It's going to do bonkers number at the box office. It's going to be good. It might even pick up a few Academy Awards come early next year. Thanks again to our friends at Paramount Pictures Canada for giving us early access. Sorry if I was too harsh on the movie. But thank you for joining us on today's show. We hope you enjoyed. Be sure to subscribe to us wherever you like to listen to podcasts if you haven't already. And if you don't, perhaps we'll have to meet on the sandy grounds of an amphitheater near you. We can't wait to hear your thoughts on this massive follow-up to one of the great sword and sandal epics. As always, you can write into wearegeekcentric@gmail.com. That's wearegeekcentric@gmail.com. Or if that's too much like fighting for power and you'd rather fight to free Rome from men like them, you can hit us up on our socials. J-Law, where can they do that?
Well, they can reach us on Twitter at GeekcentricYT or on Instagram at wearegeekcentric.
Beautiful. As always, we have a ton of great content for you to check out. We recently wrapped our watch club for the first show under the Marvel television banner, Agatha All Along, as well as conducted a slew of wicked interviews, including interviews with Catherine Hahn and Joe Locke from the show. We also have amazing interviews from over the past few years that we always like to recommend you check out. We also have other spoiler-free reviews for Venom: The Last Dance, The Wild Robot, Transformers 1, and HBO's The Penguin. These can all be checked out wherever you listen to podcasts, as well as on YouTube at youtube.com/geekcentric. And stay tuned as we continue to bring you coverage of the biggest and best projects in the Geekiverse as we move forward towards the chilly but cozy geek holiday season. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me on the battlefield today. Strength and honor! Oh, I didn't even get one. See, I'm not as captivating as Russell. No, it's okay. No, it's okay. Hey, man, if I don't inspire that kind of pride and heroicism, it's on me. It's not on you.
I didn't even pick up on that. I'm sorry.
That's on us. As we do say,
laters.
Get home safe, guys.
Peace.